Hi, my name is Terence. I'm the founder of Humanity Protocol. I'm going to talk a little bit today about data, about identity, about what we're doing at Humanity, and why we actually think this is one of the most pressing problems in the next couple of years. So when we think about identity, I think we look at a lot of the traditional internet companies where we have accounts, right? You look at Facebook, you look at Google, you look at Twitter. These are all centralized marketplaces where they control and own all of your data. The problem, we think, is that in this coming world of artificial intelligence, digital identity is going to be broken. In fact, it is already pretty broken. If you look at right now, when you go on the internet, probably a good half the time, you're being asked to actually go prove that you are a human. What I mean by that is you're getting asked to pick traffic lights, CAPTCHAs, figuring out mathematical formulas in order to verify that you are a human being. And the reason why we need to do that is because the internet is actually already filled with bots. In fact, over 50% of internet traffic now is actually being done by bots. It's a big problem because when you look at content that is being generated on social media, a lot of that is already fake. You look at content consumption in terms of advertising. This is what we call click fraud, because essentially whoever is consuming these advertising dollars are not actually real, right? And so we actually think as time moves on with artificial intelligence being more prevalent, this is only becoming a bigger and bigger problem. So, what we decided to set out to do with Humanity Protocol around 2 years ago is to create a blockchain that focuses on data and identity. And what we mean by data and identity is essentially we're trying to figure out how do we actually verify things. And the things that we want to verify about humans, there are many of them, but we're starting with one of the core attributes, which is whether you're a human being to begin with. It seems a little bit crazy. It would seem a little bit crazy probably a couple years ago to think of, proof of personhood or proof of humanity. But nowadays, it's becoming super important, right? If you think about, even perhaps, getting random phone calls from scammers, from fraud. I was actually just chatting with a friend the other day. He actually recently had somebody create a deepfake video of his staff doing a Zoom call with him, trying to convince him to send money, right? So these are going to be bigger and bigger problems as AI tools become easier and easier to access. And so what we're doing with Humanity Protocol is starting with one of the core things, which is to verify that you're a human being, but then moving on to allow people to verify other things. What we think about in terms of verifications, it's not just about, being a human, but potentially maybe verifying that you went to this university, or potentially, where you work, or even verifying certain other attributes, verifying your nationality, verifying your age. A lot of these things where, historically, it's largely true, but moving forward, we actually think it's getting harder and harder to verify, especially in the digital world. There's something wrong with the deck. Anyways, so the way we look at Humanity Protocol is that it's something that's super important. We think the opportunity is actually massive, right? If we think about a company like Facebook that is around $2 trillion in market cap, largely because it owns a lot of data about people. It owns your social relationships, your social graphs. It knows where you went to school, who you're friends with, et cetera, et cetera. Or even looking at companies like LinkedIn, where it's also worth tens of billions of dollars, where it knows your professional relationships. The challenge for us, we think, actually moving forward, is a lot of these online relationships are going to be super easy to fake. Right? It's not very difficult for me to create an email account and open a new Facebook account. It's not very difficult for me to create a new LinkedIn account and start putting in fake information And in fact, there are already a lot of people doing that, right? And so with Humanity Protocol, what we're trying to do is essentially solve that problem. This is probably a little bit outdated. Right now, we actually have around 10 million people who've already signed on to Humanity Protocol on our app. And then the other thing is, our last round valuation when we did a fundraise was $1.1 billion. And there's going to be there's going to be a lot of exciting stuff that we're building out. Yeah, the deck is not good. Yeah, so I think, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we are building Humanity, why we think this is super important, and why we think we are actually able to capture this big market, right? So when it comes to the proof of personhood piece, one thing that we're doing is that we're actually leveraging biometrics to verify that a person is a person. What we realize is that all sorts of information now, it's super easy to fake, and the only thing that we can really ascertain to be human is actually in the physical realm. So what we started doing is we've built essentially an app, and we've also built devices to scan people's palm, where a person's palm biometrics, whether it's their palm prints or palm veins, are actually completely unique. And it's a technology that has been used in the US by Amazon for payments. It's being used by China and Tencent for payments also, for Japanese, for security. Different sort of places are starting to use biometric systems for human verification. And what we've decided to do is also create our own technology for biometrics to verify that people are human. And in fact, through the Humanity app, we already have over 1 million people who have actually verified that they're a human being. And the reason why we actually use the palm instead of some of the other biometrics, for example, WorldCoin's using the iris, is because we think it's a lot less invasive, it's a lot more convenient, and most importantly, it actually opens up other use cases such as payments, ticketing, access control, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea for us is to actually create utility and use cases from day one so that there is value for the network as well as the token. Beyond the palm scans, what we're also doing is that we're actually leveraging zero knowledge proofs and zk-TLS to verify different pieces of information. In fact, recently on our app, we actually launched the ability for people to verify their loyalty status across a wide range of airlines, hotel groups, et cetera, et cetera. So if you actually go to our app, which is app.humanity.org, and sign up, you would actually have the ability to verify, for example, your Marriott loyalty status or your Emirates reward status, et cetera, et cetera. And as a result, using zk-TLS, we're able to prove that maybe you are a frequent traveler or maybe you're a loyal customer of a certain brand. And through this, we're able to actually reward users with miles, bonuses, discounts, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very targeted sort of marketing, but the idea is that ultimately the user completely controls all their own data, completely controls who they want to share this data with, when and where. And all of this is issued as verifiable credentials on Humanity Protocol. We actually see a lot of use cases for Humanity, including, bot-free social media. If you go to Twitter right now, all you see is, Twitter accounts that are littered with bots commenting on each other, ChatGPT generated content. So there is an ability for us to actually filter out humans versus bots. We think about, KYC. The fact that, if we look at a lot of countries, including Vietnam, is trying to become more positive with cryptocurrencies, is trying to bring regulation into play. One of the key things is actually KYC, or ensuring that there is not money laundering, or that people are actually above a certain age in order to be able to trade and own assets. And so one thing that we're actually doing with Humanity Protocol is creating reusable KYC credentials so that once a person has done a KYC once, across all platforms, all blockchains, all ecosystems, all centralized exchanges, they would no longer have to do it again. The other thing that we're also focused on is what we call one person, one vote, sort of mechanisms for DAOs. If we think about a lot of blockchains right now, historically, the way voting works is tied to, proof of stake, how much money you actually have. And one of the key things we're trying to solve is how do we actually create systems that allow for people to vote based on a one person, one vote mechanism, but not easily gameable, in the sense that having somebody create many different accounts to mess up with the systems. And so this is something that we're also solving with Humanity. Yeah, so, I want to talk a little bit about ZKTLS and what we're doing on that front. As I mentioned, if you actually go to our app right now, you would already see a number of different credentials that can be generated. But I think for us, the goal is that, a lot of data in this world are sitting siloed in different places, owned by different companies, where the user does not control. What we actually want to do with Humanity Protocol and our ZKTLS technology is actually allow people to verify things, allow people to prove various things about themselves, and ultimately control that data to choose who they want to share that information with. Right? As I mentioned earlier, it might be your travel loyalty statuses, it might be your hotel stuff, and then it might even just be, hey, you know what, your Uber rating or your Airbnb reviews, et cetera, et cetera. We actually think this opens up a lot of possibilities, whether it's from a marketing perspective or, a fraud prevention standpoint. So I think, this slide is a little bit complicated, but ultimately it speaks a little bit about how we think about Humanity Protocol and some of the technology that we've built underneath. Essentially, what we have on Humanity Protocol is we have our own layer 2 that's on Ethereum. We have our own liquidity, we have our own token, we have our own gas fees, et cetera, et cetera. Mainnet recently went live, and we're seeing, a lot of usage, a lot of users. But one of the key things that differentiates us from other L2s like Arbitrum or Base or Polygon is there is a very big focus on integrating verifiable credentials natively into the blockchain itself. And we do that through the use of identity validators. An identity validator is essentially a trusted entity that will verify things about various users. It might be a hotel chain verifying that you have a loyalty status. It might be a bank verifying that you're KYC'd and you have a certain amount of money in the bank account. Or it might be even your university verifying that you actually completed and graduated from a degree there, right? And so we are now starting to onboard different types of identity validators, and we'll have pretty exciting announcements over the coming weeks with very big name companies all around the world who are coming on as identity validators to verify different things about their users, right? And all of this essentially creates an encrypted piece of data that's stored on decentralized storage, and we use zero knowledge proofs to allow users to choose who and where they want to share this information with. So the idea is that down the road, maybe it's even, when somebody is applying for insurance, they actually have a medical record credential that's being issued on Humanity Protocol, so they can easily prove their medical history. Or when applying for a job, having the ability to actually very easily prove that you went to the school and you've previously worked at these companies. So this is sort of a snapshot of how we're building Humanity Protocol, and there's a lot of exciting technology that's coming out. Just as a quick last point, so Humanity Protocol does have a token. It actually recently launched a couple weeks ago. It's now trading across pretty much all major exchanges, from Bybit to Binance to BingX, et cetera, Gate. And it's really interesting because when we think about the H token, we actually think it's all about value accrual for our users, for token holders, and making sure that there's utility from day one. What I mean by that is ultimately the token is used as gas fees for our layer 2 blockchain, But more importantly, it's actually used as a staking token for identity validators to be able to issue credentials. And when it comes to different sort of companies, enterprises, platforms, games, whatever it is, they ultimately, need to use the Humanity Protocol token, the H token, in order to be able to make verifications. And I think the idea for us, a little bit, we get compared a little bit to WorldCoin because of, proof of personhood, data, identity, biometrics. I think one of the key differentials between us and WorldCoin is that the WLD token is largely focused on UBI, which is distributing as many of these tokens for free to users as possible. Whereas for us, when it comes to the Humanity Protocol token, we actually focus mainly on the utility piece. How do we ensure that the token actually has utility from day one? How can people hold it? How can people earn it? How can people use it so that there's more value that's being attributed to Humanity Protocol holders? So that's a quick intro to Humanity Protocol for me. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Terence Kwork, for your passionate insights to our event today. Thank you very much.